A 36-year-old soldier just kicked France out of his country, and he's just 36 years old. He overthrew his own government in a single day. He wears military gear, speaks with fire, and refuses to bow to the West. He's rejecting Western aid, defying global superpowers, and calling for African unity with fire in his voice. Guess who he is? His name is Ibrahim Traoré, and right now, the US is watching him very closely. Traoré is young, armed, and unafraid of any terror. What else do you expect from the brave young man who expelled French forces from his native country? It doesn't matter what you think of him. And whether you see him as a liberator or a threat, one thing remains clear. Ibrahim Traoré is not playing the game anymore, and while most people in the West have never heard of him, America is paying attention, watching closely and nervously. Some say he's the next Sankara. Others say, he's more dangerous. If you've never heard of Traoré before, hit like. If you believe Africa needs more leaders like Sankara, drop Sankara in the comments. If you respect Sankara, you would drop his name in the comments right now. Let's see how many people love Sankara and Traoré. Many people say Africa is waking up, and I believe it too, because what this young leader is doing now feels like history repeating itself. By the end of this video, you'll understand why the name Ibrahim Traoré sends shockwaves through global politics. You might be wondering, who is this guy? How did a young military officer from Burkina Faso, a country many people can't even point to on a map, become one of the most talked about figures in today's African politics? He didn't canvass for votes. He didn't rise through elections. He didn't beg for public approval and validation. He took power with force. And since then, he's been doing something very few African leaders dare to do. He's saying, no to France, no to the West, no to imperialists, no to military occupation dressed as help. But this isn't just about one man or one country. What Traoré is doing could shift the balance of power across the entire continent, and believe me when I tell you that it's already causing tension in Washington, Paris, and other parts of the world. So in this video, we break it all down. Who is Ibrahim Traoré? Where is he from? Where does he get his confidence from? Why did he take power? What does he want? Why is the West afraid of him? And why are global powers suddenly watching a young African soldier like a threat? To understand the man shaking the system, you have to know where he came from, and what he's really fighting for. Before the headlines and propaganda on social media, before the military fatigues and fiery speeches, there was the man who was prepared to seize power. Ibrahim Traoré was just a boy growing up in a small town in Bondakwi, located in western Burkina Faso. Ibrahim Traoré was born in Kara, Bondakwi, Mohand Province, on March 14, 1988. Traoré came of age during one of the darkest and most controversial periods in Burkina Faso's post-colonial history. Just a year or two before his birth, something happened that would silently shape his political worldview for decades to come, and that was the assassination of Thomas Sankara. Like Ibrahim Traoré, Thomas Sankara was a radical revolutionary who took power at 33. He was popularly known as Africa's Che Guevara. He renamed the country from Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, which means the land of upright people, and spent 4 years fighting corruption, imperialism, and dependency on foreign aid. But in 1987, he was killed in a coup led by his best friend, Blaise Compaoré, a man who would go on to rule Burkina Faso for the next 27 years. So when Traoré was growing up, the man leading his country was the traitor who killed the revolutionary. That contradiction, which was the buried truth of Sankara, was quietly alive in many Burkinabe households, especially among the youth. Traoré grew up in a modest Muslim family. They were not wealthy, and they had zero godfathers or political connections. But the story has it that Ibrahim Traoré was incredibly gifted and intelligent, especially in mathematics and science. After receiving his primary education in Bondakwi, he attended a high school in Bobo-Dioulasso, the second largest city in Burkina Faso, where he was known as being quiet and very talented. In 2006, he eventually earned admission to study geology at the University of Ouagadougou, which happens to be one of the top schools in the country. He was part of the Association of Muslim Students and the Marxist National Association of Students of Burkina Faso, ANEB. In the Marxist National Association of Students of Burkina Faso, he rose to delegate and became known for defending his classmates in disputes. He graduated from the university with honors. And it was there, during his university years, that two things began to take root. First was his exposure to leftist and Pan-African political theory, including Sankara's writings. Secondly, he developed an intense desire to serve in the military. This strong desire wasn't out of the need to get a job, but was a path to national duty. Ibrahim Traoré joined the Burkinabe army in 2009 and graduated from the Georges Namono Military Academy. He quickly earned a reputation for being serious, disciplined, and sharp, even under undue pressure. He trained with the Artillery Regiment of Kaya, then specialized in anti-terror operations, a crucial role given the rising threat of jihadist violence in the region. He was sent to Morocco for anti-aircraft training before being transferred to an infantry unit in Kaya, a town in northern Burkina Faso. In 2014, he was promoted to lieutenant, and in the same year, Traoré joined MINUSMA, a United Nations peacekeeping force involved in the Mali War. As Islamist insurgencies spread from Mali into northern Burkina Faso, Traoré found himself on the front lines. He was constantly thrown at the war front and not in some office where he would watch TV and enjoy the chill of an air conditioner. In 2018, he was cited as one of the MINUSMA soldiers who showed courage during major rebel attacks in the Tombouctou region. He subsequently returned to Burkina Faso, where he assisted in operations against the escalating jihadist insurgency. Traoré fought at Djibo, in the Otapuanu offensive of 2019, and several other counterinsurgency operations in the country's north. Unlike many political elites, he was the one dodging bullets, not just giving press conferences. But while Traoré was fighting terrorists in the north, he was watching something just as dangerous happening behind him: the collapse of trust in his own government. By his late 20s, Ibrahim Traoré was no ordinary soldier. He had grown beyond the young man who enlisted in the army. By this time, he was more mature and informed. He was tactical, focused, and had something many of his superiors lacked, and that was the respect from the troops on the ground. He was promoted to captain in 2020. Traoré later said that he became disillusioned with his country's leadership around this time, as he saw the widespread lack of equipment of Burkinabe soldiers, while politicians were handing out big brown envelopes and suitcases of money for bribery. He gradually became the spokesman for soldiers stationed in the north who were frustrated with their government. As Burkina Faso descended into chaos, it wasn't just the terrorists in the northern region that posed a threat to the country, but it was the ineffective leadership in the capital. Islamist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS had begun attacking notable places such as schools, churches, markets, and sometimes entire villages. This was a big blow to the nation. Thousands were killed. More than 2 million people were displaced. The entire country was in chaos and shambles. To make matters worse, the government were barely present and poorly equipped to handle the issues. The government were slow to act, and consequently, the people lost hope and faith in them. Meanwhile, young officers like Traoré were risking their lives on the battlefield with outdated weapons and little backup. Right there on the war ground, Traoré began to stand out. Not just for his military rank, but for his voice and leadership skills and abilities. He criticized the government's failure to protect civilians in private, and eventually discussed the government's inability in closed military circles. Traoré was part of the group of army officers that supported the January 2022 Burkina Faso coup d'état and brought the patriotic movement for safeguard and restoration military junta to power. He questioned foreign military aid, wondering why, despite all the funding from France, the US, and ECOWAS, the situation of the country kept getting worse. In 2021 and 2022, as public frustration exploded, something started to change inside the Burkinabe army. Guess what it was? Yes, you guessed right. A coup happened around that period, but something must have been responsible for it. What happened right inside the Burkinabe army was this: young soldiers stopped trusting their generals. They lost confidence and hope in their superiors, and they started listening to people like Traoré. His peers respected him, his men followed him, and slowly, whispers of change turned into a plan. But he wasn't in this alone. In January 2022, a military officer who goes by the name Paul-Henri Damiba staged a coup and ousted President Roch Kaboré. Like many African leaders, Damiba made a series of promises. He promised security. He promised a better life. He promised to defeat terrorism in the country. But within months, things got worse. The system had gone bad and deteriorated beyond what they witnessed in President Roch Kaboré's regime. The terrorist attacks increased. The morale and hope of the people decreased. And Traoré, now a captain in the army, began saying what everyone else was thinking in their minds. We just traded one failure for another. And then, on one September morning in 2022, Ibrahim Traoré made his move. That was the second coup in less than a year, and it wasn't a coincidence. It was a well-calculated move which sent shockwaves across the world. On the morning of September 30, 2022, the people of Burkina Faso woke up to a familiar sound: gunfire in the capital. Armored vehicles. Roadblocks. Soldiers. But this wasn't a terrorist attack. It was a coup, the second one in just 8 months, and this time, it wasn't led by a general. It was led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a young soldier of only 34 years old. The coup began early in the morning when heavy gunfire and explosions were heard in several parts of the capital, Ouagadougou, including in the Ouaga 2000 neighborhood that houses both the presidential and military junta headquarters. Masked soldiers organized blockades in the capital center. The pro-coup troops appeared to mainly belong to the Cobra unit. Clashes took place at a military base, Camp Baba Sai, where Damiba was mainly based. Gunfire was also reported at the Kosiam Palace. State TV went off the air. Hours later, the interim government admitted an internal crisis within the army and said talks were underway to reach a settlement. On Facebook, interim President Damiba admitted that there had been a change in mood among certain elements of the National Armed Forces. Negotiations between the revolting troops and the government were unsuccessful. As civilians realized that a coup was taking place, groups gathered in the capital to gather information or demonstrate support for the coup plotters. In the evening, Captain Traoré announced that he and a group of officers had decided to remove interim President Damiba due to his inability to deal with a worsening Islamist insurgency in the country. He imposed a curfew from 9 p.m. to 5. Suspended all political and civil society activities, closed all air and land borders, and suspended the constitution of Burkina Faso. Traoré declared that he was the new head of the patriotic movement for safeguard and restoration. He also dissolved the government and the Transitional Legislative Assembly. His message was simple but powerful. He said, "The current leadership has failed. The fight against terrorism has become a lie. We are taking over to restore security, dignity, and sovereignty." Within hours, Burkina Faso's head of state, President Paul-Henri Damiba, was removed. There was no extended gun duel or battle. There was no drawn-out civil war. Traoré had the support of the troops, especially the junior officers and frontline units. And, perhaps more importantly, he had the support of the streets. In cities across the country, people cheered the coup. The entire country erupted in happiness, even though their fight against insecurity and insurgency had not been won yet. Protesters waved Russian flags and chanted for Traoré. Many saw him as a fresh face and solution in a broken and rotten system. In areas where Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba had grown distant and elitist, Ibrahim Traoré was more direct, no-nonsense, confrontational, strict, and grounded. He promised no luxury cars, no excessive spending, and zero tolerance for corruption. And he spoke with the kind of conviction that made people listen. He also didn't call himself the savior. He wasn't quick to announce himself as the president right away. He said, "If this is temporary, let it be temporary. I'm here to clean house." But he wasn't just targeting his predecessor. The message was bigger than that. We don't want France. We don't want puppet governments. We want to take our future back. But what Traoré did next sent shockwaves across Europe, and made Washington sit up straight. Less than 4 months after taking power, Ibrahim Traoré did something no one thought possible. It was something unimaginable and very few African leaders had dared to do before. He kicked France out. Damn! Not just politely scaled back. He terminated Burkina Faso's military cooperation agreement with France. He ordered the French ambassador out of the country. He demanded that French troops leave their military base in Ouagadougou, and gave them just 1 month to pack their things out. The French army officially ended its operations in the country in February 2023. To put this in proper context, and for you to know what happened here, it is important to give you some background knowledge on this. France has had deep military, economic, financial, and political control over West Africa since the colonial era. Even after independence, France maintained a strong influence through currency systems, military bases, trade deals, and advisors. Burkina Faso, like many former colonies of France, had relied so much on France for so-called counter-terrorism help through operations like Barkhane. But after years of working with the French, Traoré, and much of the public, saw no results. The terror attacks kept rising. Lives and properties were lost. Villages were being wiped and swept off the map. And French troops, though heavily armed with sophisticated weapons, seemed more interested in maintaining strategic zones than protecting Burkinabe citizens. In January 2023, Traoré stood firm. He maintained his ground and said these words: "France has not been an ally. They've been part of the problem." And just like that, over 60 years of military cooperation unraveled. Traoré didn't stop there. Listen closely to what he did next. He rejected Western aid with strings attached. He suspended French media outlets like Radio France Internationale and France 24, accusing them of pushing propaganda, and called out imperialism hiding behind humanitarianism. These weren't empty gestures. Those actions of his were statements of true independence. Traoré's confidence and boldness in sending France packing sent signals across Africa, and alarms through NATO. His message to France was crystal clear: we are no longer your military outpost. We are no longer your colony. We will find our own way, with or without your approval. And it wasn't just France he was pushing away. It was also who he was moving toward that got the world's attention. When Ibrahim Traoré shut the door on France, he opened another one, quietly, but deliberately. He didn't say it out loud at first. But his meetings, his posture, his statements, and the new flags showing up at protests told the story. He was forming a new alignment and turning toward the path of Russia. Russian officials were some of the first to publicly congratulate Traoré's leadership after the 2022 coup. The Russian media painted him as a strong anti-colonial leader, echoing the likes of Thomas Sankara. Soon after, Russian flags began appearing in the streets of Ouagadougou. They didn't appear by accident but by intent. What followed next was alarming. Then came whispers of something more dangerous: the Wagner Group. Wagner, Russia's infamous private military company, had already gained influence in Mali and the Central African Republic. They offered security forces and propaganda in exchange for resource access. And now, Burkina Faso was allegedly next on their list. While Traoré has never officially confirmed Wagner's involvement, several clues point toward a growing partnership. There were high-level meetings between Burkinabe and Russian officials. Also, there were sudden shifts in military logistics and air support in the north. And the quiet disappearance of French counter-terror intel in exchange for something else. Traoré also signaled alignment with China, hinting at future deals involving infrastructure, gold, and mineral rights, thereby bypassing traditional Western lenders like the IMF and World Bank. This wasn't just an anti-France stance anymore. This was a geopolitical realignment. A realignment where Burkina Faso was stepping into a new axis of power. A triangle between Russia, China, and radical African sovereignty. And guess the scariest part for the West? Ibrahim Traoré was gaining fans fast. His popularity was not just in Burkina Faso, his home country, but his fame also spread across the entire Sahel, including Niger, Mali, and Guinea. So you see why they are scared of him. To the people, he was a liberator. And to the West, he's a potential proxy threat and possibly the next strongman they can't control. But what really keeps Washington up at night isn't just Traoré's alliances, it's actually what he represents. At first, when the rumors of Traoré filled the airwaves, the US stayed quiet. There were no harsh condemnations, no threats of sanctions. It was just the usual diplomatic phrases, "We're monitoring the situation." But behind the scenes, Washington was concerned, very concerned about Traoré's moves and alliances. Because Traoré didn't fit the usual mold. He wasn't a billionaire warlord. He was not a hungry African leader who scrambled for attention or sympathy from the West. He wasn't a fragile puppet they could manipulate through aid packages, foreign investment, or UN pressure. He wasn't a person who could betray or sell his people. He was different from other African leaders. He was young, wildly popular, and deeply ideological. He talked about self-reliance, ending dependency, terminating cultural imperialism, and rejecting neocolonialism. Not just for Burkina Faso, but for the entire Africa. And that makes him dangerous in a different way. When we say dangerous, we don't mean to say he's been up to something disastrous. After all, he's not building nuclear weapons. He's not threatening world war. But he is doing something different. Something most African leaders have never done for ages. He's building something the West has always feared, an idea and a liberation movement that is spreading like wildfire. When a man like Traoré stands in fatigues and tells a crowd of African youth, "We don't need the West to survive," and then actually backs it up by kicking foreign troops out, that's not rebellion. That's inspiration and liberation to millions. To add to that, there is a growing Russian and Chinese presence in the region, and suddenly, the Sahel is no longer a Western sphere of influence. The Sahel is free from Western control of any kind. From an intelligence standpoint, here's what the United States worries about. Number 1. They are worried about losing drone and surveillance access in a key anti-terror zone. Number 2. They are concerned about new resource contracts being handed to China. Number 3. The US is apparently distressed and upset about Burkina Faso becoming a hub for Russian-aligned military activity. But more than any of that, what they fear the most is the domino effect. If Ibrahim Traoré succeeds, if he eventually restores order, if he grows the economy, and holds the line without bowing to the West, he will become a model, a catalyst, a legend, a star, and a strong force. And in the eyes of Western strategists and stakeholders, that might be the greatest threat of all. And here's the thing, Traoré isn't the only one doing it. The revolution fire is spreading across Africa, and millions are breaking free from bondage in their home country. Ibrahim Traoré didn't light this fire alone, but he's fanning the flames. Across West Africa, a new political reality is taking shape. Take a look at Mali, Guinea, and Niger. What do you see? In each of these countries, young military leaders, often in their 30s and early 40s, have seized power with a similar message: no more foreign control. No more economic slavery. No more fake democracy. In Mali, General d'Armée Assimi Goïta led a coup and also expelled French forces, ending ties with ECOWAS and leaning toward Russia. In Guinea, Colonel Mamadi Doumbouya took over in 2021 and said, "We will no longer entrust our future to foreign hands." In Niger, the July 2023 coup leader, General Abdourahmane Tiani, echoed the same cry: let Africa decide its own destiny. And in all three countries, just like in Burkina Faso, you'll see Russian flags at protests, portraits of Sankara, and chants of "Africa for Africans." On the 16th of September 2023, Ibrahim Traoré, Assimi Goïta, and Niger's leader, General Abdourahmane Tiani, formed the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, in response to the 2023 Nigerian crisis. This confederation, as you may call it, is a powerful military and political pact. Here are more reasons they assembled. Number 1. To resist ECOWAS sanctions. Number 2. To create a joint defense force. Number 3. To exit the CFA franc system. And eventually, number 4. To form a new bloc of sovereign African nations. To many Western analysts, this looks like a rebellion. But to millions of Africans, it looks like a revolution. For decades, Western governments funded stability in Africa, and got raw materials, cheap labor, and influence in return. Now, a new generation is rising to say, "We are not your resource pit. We are not your dumping ground. We are not your client states. We are not your slaves. And whether you agree with their methods or not, one thing is clear, they are not asking for permission. But here's the part no one's prepared for. The fallout is just beginning, and the next decade could change Africa forever. In the eyes of Western media, these men are junta leaders. But in the eyes of their people, they're warriors, rebels, and sons of Sankara. And here's what's terrifying for the old world order. They're talking to each other. They're building alliances. And they're just getting started. This isn't just about Burkina Faso. It's about a shift that could rewrite the African story, economically, culturally, politically, even spiritually. That's the wildest part. Traoré isn't alone. Even if they silence him, how do they silence the thousands of young, military-backed leaders who are hungry for revolution? The West is losing its grip, and they know it. And Traoré? He's just the first domino. These young African leaders rising are all saying the same thing, Africa for Africans. No more puppets. No more masters. No more slavery. No more dependency. The revolution is bigger than one man, and that's why the West is scared. Take a look at Mali, Niger, Guinea, and Burkina Faso. You'd find young leaders rising to take responsibility. They are not wearing expensive suits or smiling to the camera while shaking hands with important political figures from the West or spending the entire day granting press conferences. They are determined to rescue their country. They come with boots, uniforms, and clenched fists, so you can tell they mean business. They're tearing down decades of foreign influence, and building something new. Something the West may no longer control. And the question no one can answer yet. Is Ibrahim Traoré leading a revolution? Or is he the catalyst for something much bigger? Ibrahim Traoré may be just 36 years old. He may not have global power. He may look young and inexperienced to most people. But what he has is rarer. He has a vision that people believe in. Whether he succeeds or falls, one thing is clear. He's already changed the game and inked his name in the legendary history pages. And history is now watching him. Whether you see him as a visionary or a threat, one thing is clear, Traoré is not just making headlines, he's making history. He's challenging empires, awakening a slumbering and sleeping generation, and reminding the world that Africa will not be silent anymore. Whatever happens within the next couple of years could reshape the global order and change how the world sees Africa. If you thought this was powerful, just wait, because we're just getting started. If this story opened your eyes, don't stop here. Smash that like button. Hit that subscribe button for more real stories like this that they don't teach in school. Next up, watch our next video on the rise and assassination of Thomas Sankara, the man who laid the foundation Ibrahim Traoré is walking on today. And don't forget to share, there are lots of people who need to see this and know that Africa has entered a new era. Help get this video to people asking questions by sharing this video. It doesn't cost a fortune to do so. I love history, and I hope you do. If you enjoyed this video and you love what Ibrahim Traoré is doing, drop his name in the comments. Let's see the number of people who love him. Thank you for watching. I will see you again in the next video. Bye.